Hi, welcome to the TAMU ACM SIGGRAPH podcast. This is John Donaldson, the Industry Relations Officer, and today we're sitting down with Karla Chang, who's a rigger at SuperPlastic. So, Karla, introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, John. I like you said, my name is Karla. I graduated just a little under a year ago, so I am at my first job in the industry. I moved up to Vermont for that first job, so right now it's snowy and cold outside, and actually it's in about 40 degrees now, and it feels like spring because it's just such a big difference from like the negative temperatures we've had lately. But yeah, so currently I'm at my first job in Vermont, and I got my bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University, majored in visualization. So that's where I'm at right now.
Great. It was really gross and like 80 degrees here today, so it's definitely interesting to have like the change of weather.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think it's ever been negative in Texas.
No, I don't think so either. It's taken some getting used to, and I've appreciated it a bit now, but I am ready for summer.
So did you grow up in Texas? How'd you like move around throughout your life?
Yeah, I was actually born in Lima, Peru. So I am a first-generation immigrant, which is interesting. My family moved to Texas when I was like 5 years old because my dad was getting his master's degree and later his PhD from Texas A&M University. So I grew up in College Station, and I grew up in central Texas atmosphere, and College Station had really good, all the elementary schools had really good ties to the university, so I knew about A&M all growing up. And then around when I was 12 years old, I moved to El Paso, Texas. So I got kind of a change of environment there, and it was good to just I feel like you learn a lot of things when you move from one place to another and you're in a brand new environment. So yeah, I went to high school in El Paso, and I ended up going back to College Station to get my degree at Texas A&M. Ended up actually living with my sister for a bit because she also went back to Texas A&M. So yeah, that was pretty much all of my life was in Texas, even though I'm from Peru, I am pretty American. And yeah, and then I moved to Vermont, like I said, and that was a big change.
So how did you end up in Vermont? I know it's not really a hub for animation, but are there companies there? What's the scene like?
It's definitely not a big hub, but there's a lot of small hole in the wall type of places. Especially there's a big art scene up here with art events and people having small art shows every once in a while. I didn't know this when I moved here, but there's a really big university here in the city I'm in. I'm in Burlington, Vermont, which is so small. It's such a small place, but it's the biggest city in all of Vermont. And it's the most urban, has the most population of youth because there's 5 different colleges here. There's a couple universities and some community colleges. And one of these community colleges, Champlain College, has a game degree program. So a lot of my coworkers went to Champlain College, and they know a lot of people that are in the game industry, and also some of their classmates started their own game companies from home, and so they still live in Vermont, but they're running their own game company. So there's a little bit here, and it's not as in your face you wouldn't expect there to be, but there's a lot of art festivals, and there's a place here, an art studio, where every other Wednesday they have life drawing, free life drawing sessions where there's a model and people just show up, bring their own materials and practice. So there's a bit of a community for that here. You have to one, be kind of in the scene and be looking for it.
Awesome. So that brings us to your job and what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about SuperPlastic?
Yeah, so SuperPlastic is still, and it might change over the couple of years, but it's primarily, we are a toy company and we make art toys, so collectible toys, not toys for kids. we have these two characters. There's like a cat type of figure and a rabbit figure, and we collaborate with famous artists from around the world. And some of these artists even like have ties to Disney, and they're graphic artists in Portugal and in New York. So we collaborate with these artists, and we get these artists to make custom designs on our toys, and then we sell very limited numbers of these toys. It's really cool because our fans are super loyal, and like we will drop a toy and it will be sold out in like within minutes of us announcing on Instagram that we released a new toy. So yeah, first and foremost, toy company, but we're starting to do some new things that I think are opening a lot of doors for us in the future, and that's actually why I got hired. So they decided to take their two main toy characters, which is the cat and the rabbit, and they redesigned them to be more humanoid and like exist in the human world. And by the way, the cat's name is Janky and the rabbit's name is Googymon. So yeah, they redesigned these two guys to be humanoid, and they made Instagram accounts for the two characters that we will call them animated celebrities. And they're basically just living out their lives on social media. One way that a coworker described it to me that I think makes sense is, imagine if Buzz and Woody had Instagram accounts. That's what I do. I make the content on those Instagram accounts. I rig for the content. So yeah, that's kind of what SuperPlastic does. We're pushing a lot of we're trying out that like new realm of using social media as an entertainment platform. And we also have apparel, and we're going to come out with new characters soon. We're basically just building up a world, and building up a lot of IP, and trying out and seeing like what we can do with that.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I do, like my specific job is I do rigging. So like I said, I was talking to you earlier, my job is not any different from what I would be doing at a game studio, or no, not game studio. It's not any different from what I would be doing at a regular animation studio for movies. Like I'm rigging props, I'm rigging clothing, I'm rigging characters, and I'm writing some tools. And all of the final rendered images in animations that I work on are just posted on Instagram instead of like being shown on a movie screen.
Right. How much of it is like stills and how much of it is like animation?
So I think we are making like one or two. Our goal is to make one or two animations a month, because the animations are a little bit more interesting and like engaging than the stills. But definitely the animations take a little longer, right? Because you're rendering and animating all of that. Whereas with the stills, you just have to pose the characters and render out one frame. And when we started out, actually when I joined, when I got hired, like we didn't even have the final design of Googymon and Janky. So when we were starting out, we were mainly posting stills. And as we were changing the like face design, like we had the rigs done, and we had like their hands were done and rigged. So we would post, when we were starting out, we would post just like close-ups of their hands and like silhouettes and stuff, just like as teasers, while we were still developing the final look of the face. So yeah, first we did a lot of stills because that was faster, and the goal was just to get started and get people to already like start seeing who Googymon and Janky were. But now that as we built up our tools, because at first we didn't have any tools, as we started building up our tools, we were able to produce stuff faster. We built up our render farm, we built up our pipeline, so then we were able to do more movies, more animations instead of stills. And yeah, so I hope that we're going to be making more animations coming up, but we're definitely making more than we used to.
Well, that's really cool. So, like on a wider scope, it's a very like new media thing, right? With virtual influencers. Can you talk about what you're doing has a place in the animation industry or other industries like the fashion or the social media or the advertising industry?
Yeah, so I think a really cool thing about what we're doing, about using social media as a distribution platform for animation. It's a lot faster and there's a lot less red tape that we have to go through to get our content out there. So like with the traditional studio model, you know, you have an idea and you either like pitch it to a studio and have that studio one like think that it's a good idea, and then you have to get investors, and that whole process of just pitching your idea could take literally years, and you have to change your idea because the studio that you're trying to sell it to might think, oh, maybe audiences won't like that, like let's change this thing about it. So it's a slower process, and it's obvious, like, yes, it's been done and it's obviously like possible, but it's slower. So our CEO, actually, he's been trying to get a movie done for a couple of years now, and he's been talking to some production studios and trying to sell them Gugimon and Janky and trying to already get that started. But after it just took so many tries and just no progress was getting made, he was like, you know what, we're just going to hire our own team. We're going to make stuff and we're going to distribute it through Instagram, and like we can do whatever we want with that. So I think that's definitely, I really don't know of another place that's doing exactly that, like animation through Instagram. So I think that it's a really exciting, it's an exciting venue for that. Because like I said, it's faster, it's cheaper, and you have a little bit more creative flexibility. And who knows, like maybe there's going to be more places popping up doing that. So that's I think the biggest difference between the biggest impact that I think like social media can have on animation is it's just providing like a more free just place to do stuff. You don't have to like make sure that that audiences are going to buy tickets to see your stuff in movies, because you can just try it out. It's a little less, like, there's a little bit of less risk there. And then with like the advertising industry and like with the fashion industry and social media in general, like there's a lot of virtual influencers out there that I didn't even know about until I started working here. But there's virtual humans out there that are getting real sponsorships with clothing brands and tech brands and fashion companies. So the cool thing about virtual influencers is that, you know, they can do things that real humans can't. So like there's a virtual model, there's like a model out there who is completely fake, and she gets real deals with real companies. And when you think about it, like a virtual human can work at any time of the day. Like they can get stuff done at night. If like a real human was being sent to like Paris, you know, there was the cost of like the flight and all of that. But with a virtual human, you literally like just composite a render of them over Paris. And if it looks about the same as a human, then that's pretty attractive to clothing companies and fashion brands. So I think there's a lot of them out there, and I think there's still a lot of kinks with them. A lot of them still look really just in the uncanny valley and not really convincingly human, and it's a little bit more fake. Well, actually, it's a lot more fake for sure. But I think there's going to be more of that coming up soon.
Do you think that having animated characters puts less like ethical dilemma on what you're doing?
Yeah, I was talking to my coworker about how some of the virtual influencers are really creepy to look at because they're trying to look human, but it's just missing the point. It's just missing the point. But the cool thing about what we do is that our characters are totally cartoon, and we do place them in the real world, but we're not trying to make them look like real people. So there's a little bit less of that uncanny valley thing. And it's fun because they're cartoon characters, so they can do things that real cartoon characters can do, like like fall several feet and just bounce and like not break a bone, or just completely
Right.
like dislocate an arm. Like they could rip off their left arm with their right arm and like slap somebody else with it. Like just, you know, like the types of things you see in Looney Tunes cartoons. So I don't know about ethical. Definitely we're avoiding the ethical stuff because we're not trying to like sell a real human. But I think it's solving like the visuals of it, the visuals of like creepy CG humans.
Oh, definitely. So that brings us to your studio environment. Do you think that because you're in such a small studio, you get more creative freedom and have a chance to do more for each project you work on?
Yeah. So our CEO has said several times. He said things like, "If we're not trying new things, then we're failing, or if we're not failing, then we're not making any progress." So he's all about like trying things that are new and just trying it and failing and then learning from the thing that we're failing. So it is really cool because like we even have this wheel at work called like the failure wheel. So if somebody makes like a huge mistake, like accidentally, it could be anyone. It could be like from the accounting team. Like if they make a mistake on accounting, they have to admit their mistake and then they get to spin this wheel, and whatever it lands on is like something positive or like something funny. Like one of them was you get to throw some pie in the face of the head of business development, which actually happened. Somebody messed up, they spun the wheel, and then they got to throw pie in someone's face. So yeah, there's definitely at SuperPlastic specifically, there's a big culture of trying new things and trying new models. And our CEO is really good at like one, getting investors to like support us with these new ventures, and two, just analyzing like what we're doing and trying to see like what's working and what's not.
Do you think that you have like a creative voice? Like if you came up with an idea for an Instagram piece, you could get it made?
Yeah, for sure. Um, I like my office is pretty small, so I can hear what's going on in the creative team and the story team like at all times. And sometimes I'll hear things and it'll like give me an idea for something that might be better or something that's like potentially not so good. And so I'm totally able to just go up to the creative team and ask them about what's going on and maybe suggest something. Um, Most of the time, the creative team is like changing what they're doing like so often that that like what I hear one day might not be true anymore the next day. So it goes pretty quick like that. But I definitely have a big say in developing the animation side, because when I joined, we didn't even have an animation pipeline and we didn't have a shared drive. Like people were still sharing things on Dropbox. Um, so I joined and I've been like part of the process of building up our pipeline, building up our render farm, um, and then just writing tools to figure out like how we're doing things. And I personally am more interested in like the technical side of building things, and because like I said, the story side is so volatile and I feel like they know better with what they're doing with these characters. But yeah, definitely we have the liberty to speak up, and we have monthly all team meetings where they kind of like tell everyone at work. They gather up literally everyone, not just from the animation team, but the CEOs and the accounting team, and they tell us what are the new developments from every department. So, and that's another place where we can speak up and like voice any new ideas or opinions.
Hmm. Well, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
So, going back to when you were a student, because I know you're a recent grad from A&M's visualization program, what were you doing while you were here to improve your portfolio and to improve on your skills?
I think there's two or three main things that I know for sure leveled me up. Because there's a lot of things, you know, with like just general work ethic and whatnot. But I think the three main things that I did that I know for sure leveled me up were, I think it was around sophomore year when I decided to focus on rigging specifically. And the summer before I think it was the summer before sophomore year, or maybe it was the summer after sophomore year. Who knows? Um, I took I took an online course from riggingdojo.com, which is this online like an online forum, and they have a lot of different rigging related classes and also like scripting classes. So I took like an 8-week course that was an intro to facial rigging. Um, because like A&M is really good at teaching you all parts of the pipeline, but if you want to go really in depth to one thing, you kind of have to find supplementary material and just find that in-depth stuff from other places online. So I went and I did that, and I took this class which taught me a lot of things that had been kind of skipped in my Maya intro class, um, that pushed me forward with rigging. And kind of like later on I was able to help some of my peers that were having problems, and I was like, oh, I learned this thing that is super simple, but I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't taken this class. So there was that. There was the taking the online course, and the other thing that I did that I think not just students, but I think anyone should do this. Anyone, not even just in this industry, but I asked for a lot of feedback on everything that I did, especially schoolwork or personal projects. I would send whatever I did to my to upperclassmen, to my peers, and to some industry contacts that I had, and I just asked them to give me feedback on it. And after they gave me feedback, I implemented that feedback, because that is a big thing. Like, don't just ask for feedback, also apply it and then send it back to them showing the feedback that you implemented. So that way, I think the biggest takeaway from that is it helps me see things from a more professional point of view, a more professional eye. Like, they were looking for things that I hadn't even thought of. So doing that pretty often, and I wasn't great about this in school, but they say you have to show early and show often, but especially the show early. Like, you don't have to wait until you're completely done to show what you're doing. You can show work in progress stuff. I mean, make sure there's something that you're showing the people. Make sure you have enough content for them to give you feedback on. Don't just show them like a skeleton that doesn't really do anything yet. But yeah, so that was another thing I did, was just get a lot of feedback and implement it. Helped me develop an eye, and it also just is good for other people out there to kind of get you on their radar and know that you're doing good and that you're learning. And the third thing that I did is I know I mainly wanted to do rigging for animation, but I also got involved in some projects that used Unity and VR, so like some real-time engine type of things. And I know that specifically helped me get hired at SuperPlastic, because we have plans in the future of potentially using Unreal and Unity for some real-time stuff or some AR experiences. So just because I had a little bit of that experience on my resume helped, made me a better candidate for them. Yeah.
So yeah, I know you worked with Dr. Hwaryong here in their student research program. Can you talk a little bit about what you did for student research while you were here?
Yeah, so I got first involved with Dr. Hwaryong when I was a sophomore. Maybe I was a freshman. And I was a research assistant on her creative aging studies. She would go to these like retirement homes and assisted living homes and have these workshops with the older adults. So I helped out bringing materials. I sat next to the older adults and helped them out with the activities. So that's how I got my first exposure into her research lab. And being around that, I was her research assistant for a year and a half. And then later, just being around her, I found out about other projects she was working on. And she had a project that was had some use for a rigger. So I told her I was interested in doing undergraduate research, and she took me onto her team to work on this project that involved a lot of rigging. And there were actually two projects I did with her. One of them was a project that was me and this other girl, Amber Ackley. We built a VR application, and we did that as an undergraduate research scholar program. So like we ended up writing a paper about it and all of that. And that was a lot of fun. We learned a lot through that. And I also did another thing where I helped out with an existing VR application called Muscle Action VR. And that was like this VR experience where like the user put on the headphones, and then there was a big mirror in front of them in the VR space, and they could see themselves in the mirror, but instead of their actual selves, it was an anatomical human. So it had like muscles and bones. And so when I joined on that project, the program was already written, but there were some problems with the rig and some problems with the like matching the user's movements to the virtual muscular human. So I joined that to like troubleshoot it. And it actually got accepted to SIGGRAPH Asia, so that's pretty cool.
So with participation in student research, and then I know you were also a former president of SIGGRAPH.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel that participation in Viz works variant to like the classes you take as well?
I think my biggest takeaway on the value of extracurriculars is by being in organizations and doing extracurriculars, you meet more people than you would if you were just taking your classes. And you especially meet more upperclassmen and more grad students. Like if you were an underclassman, just like I was in SIGGRAPH, and I got to meet some grad students that later I was able to reach out to and be like, hey, I know you do this because I've just seen you around. So I think with extracurriculars, they're important because our industry is very much like people oriented, and networking is never a bad thing, and you never know what could come out of knowing someone. Like there could be someone that you're in school with right now that like 10 years down the line you'll end up working at the same company as them. So one is just building those connections, and two, it's like if you see what the upperclassmen are talking about, like they're talking about internships, they're talking about jobs, you'll like start learning about those things earlier. And you could even meet someone who's doing like the thing that you want to do. So you can, being in the same organization as them gives you like a more relaxed venue to go up and just talk to them instead of like you wouldn't even know about them. Like if you were passing them through the hallway and you didn't have a class with that upperclassman. So I think that's the biggest value from organizations. And that's personally what I got the most out of SIGGRAPH was everybody that I met through being an officer and through just attending the conferences. They either became like really close friends of mine that I ended up like that I still talk to and that I still have chats with, or they're at really cool companies now, so I can ask them about how things are going. And of course, SIGGRAPH has industry talks and workshops, so those are also super valuable. So, I think those are great, but the absolute biggest thing that I remember after being in college, the thing that sticks with me the most is the people that I met through that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So not to just stump speech entirely for SIGGRAPH, but there's also the conference that happens yearly. And I know a lot of students get good experience in the industry with that. Have you ever been to the SIGGRAPH conference, and what experiences did you gain?
Yeah, I went to 2 SIGGRAPH conferences in 2017 in Los Angeles and then in 2018 in Vancouver. And that was when I've attended I went as a student volunteer. So student volunteer program, like if you don't already know, it's when you get to go for free, you get to attend the whole conference for free, but you just have to volunteer every once in a while. Like I think a total of, I don't remember how many hours, but
it was like 20 or something.
Yeah, 20 hours. So I went as a student volunteer for the first time right after my sophomore year. And it was kind of like a turning point in my college experience because it helped open my eyes to like what I should be focusing on in the next 2 years until I graduate. The really cool thing about being a student volunteer is that they have a lot of special sessions for students. So like Blue Sky, Disney, Pixar, like they'll have talks with just the volunteers and they'll show you demo reels of people and students that got into the companies, like into the internship programs, and you can talk to the recruiters and get their emails and do that right then and there. So for me, the first experience was a huge eye-opener because it helped me focus on what I should be doing. And the other really cool thing about SIGGRAPH is Texas A&M has a really big presence at SIGGRAPH. We were like a huge majority of the student volunteers, and Texas A&M also had this alumni party. Like every SIGGRAPH, there's a party with alumni. So like I got to meet some people that had graduated from A&M a couple years before me that were now working at like DreamWorks, and I could have regular conversations with them, and it was just a really great place for that. And a lot of the contacts that I made there, they were the people that I was able to reach out to later and send them my stuff and get feedback from them. So that was a really valuable experience for me. Plus, it was really fun to see the talks, hear all the talks about all the companies and see the cool tech that was coming out. And see the Computer Animation Festival, which is like has just the new animations out there, from shorts to like independent films to student films. So it was just like a huge exposure into the industry that you're going to be in a couple of years. So yeah, it was great.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about some of the personal work you've done outside of class?
Oh, outside of class. I took my classwork and then I kept working on it after the class ended. And that was my personal work, was like, just, I felt like sometimes with class projects, you have to rush at some point to kind of get it done by the deadline. But if I did that anywhere and I was unhappy with the finished product and I was compelled to keep working on it, I just kept working on it. And a lot of this was just character rigs that I did for shorts in our studio class. And I kept working on them and I sent them to people that I knew and got feedback on them. So yeah, like in school, that was, I know a lot of people that did like completely just unrelated projects to their schoolwork, and I actually wish I had done more of that, but I felt pretty busy enough with my schoolwork that it was easier to just like take what I had already made and build upon it. And to me, like, I learn better that way, is by like reiterating and building upon something than like starting from scratch every time, which sometimes starting from scratch every time is good too.
Do you think that there's any resources for people who like are riggers specifically, or have any other job in the pipeline where they only want to do one part of it, but don't have a model to rig, or don't have a finalized rig to animate, or all of that to texture? Like, how would you go about like doing something that's personalized and specific for like what you want to do, but you don't have the assets?
Right. So with the assets specifically, there's a couple of websites out there where people will sell production-ready models. I know some people that have like Disney experience that sell production-ready or rigging-ready models. So I would recommend those. If you're an animator, there's free rigs out there that you can download and use them to animate. I'm not sure about like for texturing and modeling. Like you can't really download assets because you have to learn how to make them if you're like a texturer and a modeler.
Well, right. Like with modeling especially, that's like the first step. So I mean, you could take concepts, but
yeah, exactly. That's another thing too. Like if you want to make a cool character but you don't want to design it, there's ArtStation, and there's so many great concepts out there on ArtStation that I would recommend. Yeah, and of course, like, not just getting assets, but if you don't know how to do something, there's so many tutorials out there. I wish I had done this more in school. I wish I had Googled more, because there's so many times at work where I like have this problem and I will solve it within a minute by just Googling it. Whereas, I don't know why I didn't do that as much in college. Maybe I just practiced more through college. But yeah, there's so much stuff online that you would be surprised like what you could find out there.
All right, so just kind of widening back out the scope. You're at your first job right now working at SuperPlastic.
Yes.
But what do you want to do like further into your career? Like, what do you see your career in the industry as being going forward? Maybe 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah. Um, I'm not. I kind of want to try just a lot of things. I I'm interested in getting feature film movie experience, but I'm also I think what I want out of my own career is to whatever I'm doing to just always be learning something and always be learning from whatever I'm doing. Like I don't want to be at a job where I just make the same thing every day and that's my job and that's all they need me to do. I want to be somewhere where I have like the freedom to try new techniques, to write tools, to improve my own Python skills. So my personal goal is really kind of not exactly go with the flow, but just have confidence in the fact that I love what I'm doing, and if some opportunity comes up that intrigues me, or I have to I want to try living in Spain for a year. Like I don't know, I'll just jump around and whatever I'm doing, I just want to make sure that I'm enjoying it. One long-term goal that I definitely do want to do is I want to one day speak at a seminar at like a SIGGRAPH conference. Like, yeah, I don't mean to go back to the SIGGRAPH, but really,
No, totally, yeah.
but really, like, I don't know. I think it would be a really cool like a career moment to present at a conference about like a cool technique that my studio is doing or a cool new thing that we're trying. So that's one thing that I'm like keeping on the radar. We'll see when that happens or how that happens, but yeah.
Hmm. Do you think, I know a lot of people supplement animation work by also teaching. Do you think you'd want to go into teaching?
I've thought about that. I think I would. I think I wouldn't rule it out. I think right now I wouldn't, because I feel like I still have a lot more to learn. So I'm happy like
Right.
being actually like in the industry, like actually getting to do things. But I've had a lot of mentors that like helped me out, that I think it would be really cool to eventually be a professor again and like give back and teach some of that knowledge. And it doesn't even have to be like I'm gonna stop being in the industry and be a professor. Like I can do that also while I'm still at work. I could give online classes, or I could take a break, be a professor, and then go back to the industry. So I'm definitely not ruling it out. And like I've always loved teaching and tutoring my friends. So I think one day it might happen.
Right, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so just kind of to end it off, we like to ask for one piece of information, like industry related, demo reel, whatever, and then one like completely unrelated, can't be about animation at all. So I can give you a second if you need to think about it, but yeah, so one piece of information related, and then one just like anything, any advice.
Okay. Well, I feel like everyone's probably heard these before, but I found them to be like especially true once I started working. But related to the animation industry, and also this is not just animation, this is any industry, and this is also just life. But in this industry, you have to be willing to learn always. Like just because you're not a student anymore doesn't mean that the learning stops. Any new job that you go to is going to have their own proprietary tools, their own workflow, their own project management program and system. So you have to be ready and willing to learn new techniques and new methods always. And if you're easy to teach, then it just makes you that much easier to work with, and it just makes your employers like you more and make your teammates like you more. So yeah, like it's not like you learn everything while you're in school and then you're ready. You're gonna probably feel like you don't know what you're doing when you start your first job, and that's completely normal. and the company that hired you knows that. If they're hiring you as a student, they know that you don't know everything and that you're still learning, and that's okay. And just, it's never gonna stop. You're always gonna be learning. You could be in the industry for 40 years, and then the tools will change. So that's just something to keep in mind. Oh, and another thing that is not really advice, but I wanted to mention it. My company's pretty great in that they pay for us if I take an online course that will improve my Python skills. They'll pay for it, and they offered other employees that same thing. And it just doesn't have to be animation related. What if someone on the marketing team wanted to take some graphic design course to learn a new program? They would offer to pay for it. So keep an eye out if you're a student. Ask about that. Ask if your company is ask how your company can support you to keep learning things, because you're definitely not going to know everything as a student, coming right off the bat. So yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so that's something related to animation industry. Another thing that I'm just going to, you've probably already heard it, but be easy to work with, because it really, really makes a difference. As soon as you're hard to work with, then people don't want to work with you anymore, and it just becomes a bit of a hassle. So always be a good team player. Let's see. And
no, it's fine.
I have one thing. It's not animation specific. It could be unrelated, but it could be whatever.
Okay, yeah.
But one thing that I would say, if you're a student and getting your first job, and especially if you're a woman, when you're talking to the company about salaries and about when you're talking about getting hired, and especially about salaries, before you accept anything, reach out to somebody who already works at that company. Reach out to a woman and reach out to a man and ask of your same level, and ask them what their salaries are, so that way you'll know if you're being undersold or not. And one trick, because obviously reaching out to someone and asking how much money they make is a little risky. One trick that is helpful for that is you don't have to flat out ask them how much they make. You can say, hey, do you make more or less than, and then give a number. That way they can give you a ballpark, but they don't have to give you the straight up number. And the worst that can happen is whoever you ask will say no, that they don't want to tell you how much they make. And the best that could happen is you can find out that you're being offered a lower salary than you should. So yeah, that's something that I think, I don't think people talk to students enough about that sort of thing, negotiating. But yeah, that's something that anyone should do, especially women.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that before. So that's actually really good, novel advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that was really good information. Thanks so much for talking with us today, and I hope you do well, going forward. And I can't wait to see what y'all are all producing in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see. Who knows? We've got more characters coming up, and Paul, our CEO, has some pretty big ideas. So I'm excited to see where it goes, and it could. Who knows? It's just endless possibilities right now. But yeah, no, thanks for talking to me. I'm really happy to be doing this, especially because I used to be in SIGGRAPH, so this is pretty cool to kind of do a full circle and come back and share some of my experience as someone who
now you're the master.
I wouldn't say master, but I've got some wisdom. I've got some wisdom in my years.
Okay. Well, great. For the people who are going to be at the actual meeting, we'll talk to you later. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and sign off. So thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye.